wow, that's a lot of me.
There's 2 of you. Let's see what we can do here.
There's 3 on my end.
Oh
Exciting.
my god.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys hear Entelecheia?
Yo.
Say something in the chat. Yeah, Entelecheia, you should probably talk as well.
Yeah, I should probably talk a little bit. Are we watching Chemical Wedding?
We were making fun of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Alright, let's see here.
Yeah, that one has that inexplicable scene where I think the fax machine like shoots his jizz, right?
Yeah, he like somehow sends the magical link through a fax, exactly.
Yeah, like, you know, you have like your ink cartridge, your toner cartridge, and your jizz cartridge that you have to...
Yeah, mine's always running out.
I know.
You always got to refill it every week.
Hey, that's the lame of life. What are you gonna do?
Alright guys, let's see. We got anyone in here? It looks like you got like 15 people. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. At some point I might put them up on the screen or something. Entelecheia, I'm not sure if you can see it. We can test. Can you see that text?
Yeah.
Wow, look at this technology, man.
Could you talk about Crowley's encounter with Coronzon in the Sahara Desert?
Yeah, you'll have to do some like internet lingo understanding, namely when people drop like half the letters in their message.
Right.
So let me see. It's this. Make this smaller. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna close this one for now. So for those of you who don't know, why don't you just introduce yourself? Who are you? Why are you here? Why are you into Thelema? What are your credentials, and so on?
My cred. I don't know if I have any cred, but yeah, I go by the name Entelecheia. I've been Thelema-ing for about a decade now, and I'm here because you proposed that I come here and sit on a live stream, which
this is true.
I was uncertain about. I know that you've recently gotten into the live streaming thing and that you like it, and I've never tried it before, so we'll just see how it goes. And yeah, as
I appreciate you trying.
Yeah, no, I'll give anything a try usually. But
so
yeah,
when'd you get into Thelema?
Yeah, how did I get into it? So, oh gosh, I was practicing Buddhist meditation. That was my sort of entry into spirituality generally. I was more into philosophy than anything when I was younger, and then I got into Vipassana meditation for a few years. And one of the books that I read early on that made me really excited about doing Vipassana was this book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. And it's a really fascinating sort of countercultural book about meditation, but one of the chapters in there had to do with magic, and I just kind of rolled my eyes when I saw it and
interesting. Yeah.
Skipped past it. And then I would say about a year and a half later, after doing tons and tons of meditation and going on retreats and stuff, I went back to that book and found the part on magic, and I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. He suggested Donald Michael Craig's book Modern Magic as kind of like a manual on this stuff. And Daniel was also really into like maps of awakening, and so he would compare different like maps of the processes that you go through on the way to enlightenment with each other. And so one of the maps that he had in there was the Kabbalah. And so he had mapped all the different stages of Vipassana meditation up to the like Sapphire on the Tree of Life. And I wasn't really familiar with that at that point. I was really intrigued by it though. And somewhere around that time, I think I found David Shoemaker's Living Thelema video where he talked about the tarot cards on the Tree of Life. And
tarot and the Path of Initiation. Yeah,
I had no idea that that like the tarot had anything to do with like the paths. Like, it's the most basic thing now, right? But like at that point I was like, this is really cool, because it kind of took this territory that I was already familiar with, and it's like then you bring in the tarot cards and all this visual symbolism and color and the elements and stuff. I was like, wow, this is really, really wild.
Yeah.
And then started incorporating that into the whole method and process of doing ceremonial magic, where it's sort of like you're not just looking at it now, you're stepping into that world and kind of inhabiting it and interacting with it. And I thought it was really cool. And it was like a huge change of pace from doing meditation, which was very like austere. Meditation,
Right.
you just sit there and you run all of your impressions, your sense impressions, through like a wood chipper, basically. And this was pretty different from that. And yeah, around that time, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should check out Aleister Crowley." And I was like, "Oh, I've heard of Crowley before." And he's like, "No, it's Crowley, and you got to read." He recommended Kaczynski's biography.
He nipped your mispronunciation in the bud there.
Yeah. And so I read Richard's whole biography of Crowley, and I thought it was really intriguing. And when I moved to Seattle sometime after that, I found OTO, and I was like, well, Thelema is inoffensive enough that I can kind of do this. Like, I wasn't really sure about it. And for like the first 4 years I was in OTO, I don't think I understood much of anything about Thelema. I don't know. It's like you sort of like, I don't know if your experience was like this, but I had to like grope my way around it on my own for quite a while. And then after a while, the patterns start to jump out at you. It's like, oh, I kind of remember reading about this thing here over there, and now there are all these connections that you start drawing, and you realize like, oh, there's actually some kind of structure to this.
Yeah.
So I mean, that in a nutshell is sort of how I got into it. And then once I started picking up on the patterns of things, it was very quick after that to begin developing my own insights and ideas around it.
Very cool. He said, Entelecheia, turn your volume up.
I should turn my volume up?
How do you do that? Oh, yeah, I guess that's on, or can you do that?
I can do it on my microphone. I don't know.
I can hear you fine, but it maybe, if you turn it up a little. Long as heck. Oh, that book he mentioned? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Turn Entelecheia up. How do I don't even see a thing.
I don't know, like, if it compresses my sound. I don't know, like, what kind of processing it does on my sound. I'm sure to stream it, it's compressing it quite a bit.
Probably. So yeah.
But I did turn the mic up, so I don't know if it's...
I'll just...
I don't want to max it. Yeah, I can see that it's starting to max out.
Everyone just turn your volume up, man.
Yeah, turn your volume up.
It's your fault.
Yeah, because this thing is...
Take personal responsibility for your volume issues, man.
I have to keep the gain at a moderate level, otherwise it'll start to peak.
Start to sound super metal.
Yeah, no good. So, yeah.
All right.
Turn your stereo up, bro. That's all I can say.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. You have like a background in meditation. So why ceremonial magic? What does it offer that maybe that Vipassana doesn't? Something that doesn't satisfy. What is it?
So when you're doing Vipassana meditation, I guess there are a few different ways to describe the method, but the method that I was following was when a sensation arises, you notice the sensation, you notice what it is, and then you let it go and you just move on. So it doesn't matter what the content of the meditation is, right? So the idea is that you don't want to privilege any sensation over another. So, if you're having a sensation of heat or warmth, we tend not to associate that with self. It's just it's an effect of some object in the environment, or the sound of something passing on the street. But when you start to have like a memory of a conversation you had yesterday, and then a feeling arises in relationship to that, like, oh, how dare that person say, or blah, 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 we start to associate all these sensations with self. So there's privileging of certain sensations. We call those self, or we implicitly treat those as self as more important. We move those to the center, and then these other sensations get kind of put out to the periphery, and that's how you construct a subject-object division in the field of experience. And so kind of your bread and butter Vipassana technique is to sort of flatten all of that out, right? To make it so that there is no privileging of any center point in the field of experience. And so it's really just you just apply the same method to pretty much every sensation as it comes up. You notice it. It's like, that's a sensation, that's heat, that is a thought, that is a mental image, that is warmth, that is a pleasant feeling, that's an unpleasant feeling, and you just flatten it out. And it's really effective method. It works very, very well. You will start to go through the different states and stages of awakening, or whatever you want to call it, various spiritual openings, and it comes exactly as advertised. But what I found was that after a couple of years of it and doing it very intensively, that I was getting diminishing returns after a while, and I wasn't really sure why exactly. I found out later it's very common for this to happen. And so I was mostly out of boredom with that I decided to sort of switch gears and start doing ceremonial magic. I was like, well, I just feel like doing something different. And every time I would sit down to meditate, it was just an annoying experience. And so
kind of plateaued with it.
I felt like I plateaued with it. And when you start to do ceremonial magic, it's like, I experienced it as the exact opposite of doing Vipassana meditation. So you are suddenly paying a lot closer attention to content. The qualities of sensations matter. You're like you're spending time visualizing particular things and holding them in your mind, right? Like when you imagine the archangel Raphael, or you're calling forth some spirit, it's like it's more of an activity of solidifying the sensations around particular objects rather than just atomizing everything like you do in Vipassana. And I ended up taking it up pretty seriously after a while, and pretty much not doing much meditation at all. And the attitude that I had when I did it was that I was pretty much completely abandoning what I considered to be the spiritual path, or the path to awakening at that point. And it was almost like this nihilistic kind of abandon. It's like, well, time to stop doing the serious stuff, and I'm just going to play with this for a while and just see what happens, because at least it's something I can show up for. And I had a lot of interesting experiences with it in my first year, but ultimately what ended up happening was I after about a year or so of doing magic and not really bothering that much with meditation, I had basically the equivalent of like a spontaneous awakening experience. It did not involve meditation. I wasn't doing magic either when it happened. It was very weird, but
kind of a Zen thing.
It was like a Satori kind of thing. Yeah, and it had that kind of all at once immediate insight quality to it, and it changed how I thought about the relationship between different spiritual techniques and different spiritual results, right? So when you ask a question like, well, what good is ceremonial magic to X, or what good is meditation to Y, and so on and so forth, I think oftentimes the relationship can be somewhat loose and a little bit mysterious. I think that in my case, probably what happened is that as I was doing all of this work of I was trying to come to like basically a non-dual understanding of experience, as I was describing it before. No center point, no privileging of one sensation over another. And I think by going after that the way I was sort of surreptitiously setting up another duality without really noticing what I was doing. I was making a duality between dual experience and non-dual experience. And I think what happened when I went into the ceremonial magic headlong, I think I kind of tipped the scales, or kind of balanced it out somehow. And it didn't like the way that it happened, I can't like turn it into a formula for somebody. I can't say like, oh, if you practice meditation for this amount of time and then ceremonial magic for that amount of time, the same thing will happen. I would never say that to somebody, because for me it was, like I said, it was instantaneous and quite unexpected. But I think something like that probably happened. And so,
right.
I mean,
well,
the short
it's
answer,
kind of like a boiling over point, and like all your practices up to that point where we're contributing the heat to the pot, so to speak. And it's instantaneous in the moment, but it's probably within the context of all of your reading and study and practice and stuff like that.
I think so. But the way that it happened, I can't draw like a
Right.
one-to-one. Like, oh, if you do this particular magical ritual, right, at this particular time, sort of like, how you're supposed to do like Liber 8 and like your guardian angel will just like show up. Like, I've never done
If A,
liberating, but I
then
would.
B. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
the billiard ball view of magical causality. Yeah, things don't usually happen that way, I guess. But it's interesting to compare people's actual awakening experiences to the, you know, preconceived ideas of how they should be, at least within the Thelemic system. Like, everyone's always like, is this KNC? Is that KNC? Is this crossing the abyss? Is that crossing the abyss? And fitting our own actual experiences in, like, when I think of my own experiences, they don't fit those labels very neatly. I could try to apply them, but it just doesn't feel very, very neat. And now I'm quieter. Hold on. Jesus, with all these audio. But yeah, it's that's really interesting to hear you have such a spontaneous awakening experience, even though that's not really like a thing within the Thelemic kind of milieu, or like the way we think about spiritual experience is like you have to work for it, and then like once you've like sweat all of your sweat out, you're completely dry, like then you'll have that spiritual experience or something like that.
people probably script themselves into a lot of bullshit too. Like I can imagine going through that whole HGA working, and then you do like liberate, and it's like, well, something's supposed to happen, right? So you know what I mean? Like it
Right.
would suck to do that for all those months, and then like it's just crickets.
Either something's gonna happen, or I'm gonna go psychotic and make something happen.
That's also a possibility. Just take a huge dose of shrooms or salvia or something, and
Something will happen. Yeah, that's interesting because also then people are bound by their own preconceptions of what that experience is supposed to be like, and that tends to generally limit what people actually are capable of experiencing, ironically.
totally.
But yeah, so that's interesting to me also that you're talking about the distinction between non-dual and dual experience. I think when I come at writing for the public, I assume people basically what they need is to understand non-duality, like that we understand duality well enough, for everyone's kind of trapped in it anyways. Like the first step, as Crowley might say, would be like non-duality is where we need to get to. What I hear you saying is, like, at least for yourself, is the flip side of that is particularly important for you, of being true to the duality and not even necessarily distinguishing between, like, not even seeing non-dual as like the pinnacle or the goal necessarily. Is that right?
Yeah, I went through. I think it helps to have a good bit of theory when you start. So, you know, that was kind of the theory that I was starting with, is that you're aiming toward a kind of experience or a kind of realization or direct knowledge of non-duality. But I didn't really like, you can form a certain image of that in your mind, right? A certain picture of it. And whereas what you're actually going for in a spiritual awakening can't have an image associated with it. So whatever you think it is, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like getting, like, when I realized that, I think that's when I got sort of hit over the head and realized, like, oh, like there's no such thing as a non-dual experience per se. Everything, like, if non-duality is like you're already in it. It's really just a question. Like, everything that appears dual and screwed up and sorrowful right now is actually what you're looking for, because
Right.
there's nothing outside, basically. So like I was talking to a friend of mine right before this experience happened, and he was saying to me, like, you have to be able to see that there's no hierarchical relationship between experiences. And I said something like, but that includes what you just said, right? And he's like, yeah, exactly. And that's when I realized, like, oh, reality is this process of kind of like creating hierarchies out of itself. Like, the hierarchies just happen.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of flowing and doing their own thing. There's nothing bad about them. You don't have to get away from them. It's very hard to describe, but when I realized that, that was kind of like the tipping point for me, where I was like, oh, non-duality is not a thing that I'm trying to get. It's more like, I don't know, it's more like something that's in reality, that's just there, that I need to kind of stop fighting.
Right. That does seem pretty zen, where it's like it's right in your face, like I'm gonna smack you with reality. It's right here. You're drowning in it, and you still don't see it. That kind of a thing.
Well, the way Daniel put it at one point, he says it's like running as fast as you can, as hard as you can to catch up with the present moment.
Do you see that as tied in with like the pure will idea?
Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying, because the lust of result actually after a certain point creates the duality that you're trying to transcend. But the flip side of that is, if you tell that to a beginner, they're not going to do any work to try
Right.
to understand any of this. They're going to think that they're going to form a different image in their minds and identify that image with it. So you can never really get away from the images. You can just maybe try to find an image that is conducive to a person eventually getting beyond the image, throwing it away like a scaffolding, or throwing it away like a ladder. You need like an image that eats itself after a certain point, or a theory that kind of burns itself up, or like Ramana Maharshi says, it's the stick that gets consumed by the fire by stirring the fire, right? Famous kind of non-dual.
You got to throw in that last piece at the end. Yeah, well, it's kind of like that's probably a similar struggle Crowley faced with the Holy Guardian Angel itself as a name, as a concept. He was just like, well, I could use this concept. I could say God. I could say higher self. And like each time he's just like, no, that like people are going to make this mistake of preconceiving about this or that. And so he's like, why don't I just use something that sounds totally ridiculous? The Holy Guardian Angel. Of course, that has its own problems and issues, but it does sound like a parallel kind of problem, at least in Liber LXV, where he's talking about debate not of the image, and then I'm the image beyond all images, and so on and so forth. But you got to get people onto the path somehow. So, less of result works.
What's that?
This guy, less of result works.
Less of result works. It works, bro. Well, what are you gonna say?
Sounds like a good weed trip. Nice. I don't know what that's in reference to. Maybe the awakening experience you were describing.
I was not high. I was drinking a beer in the kitchen.
What kind of beer? Some really good beer, or like?
Yeah, it was a Yeti Imperial Stout.
Wow, you remember the type? That's pretty cool.
I sure did remember it.
Yeah, you like looked and you're like, I'm gonna remember this one. Yeah.
What the hell did they put in this?
Yeah. So one question is, you're talking about sometimes the connection between a practice and its purpose is a little tenuous. I was just thinking, like, ceremonial ritual, dramatic ritual in particular. Let me get rid of this weed trip thing really quick. Whoops, I brought it back. So ceremonial ritual, dramatic ritual, group ritual, things like that. When I look at things like the Book of the Law, when I look at Crowley's writings, and I see things like, identify yourself with God, that kind of mystical language, it can be hard for me to understand like what the purpose of all the outward dramatic ritual is, right? So I think this also probably ties in with his criticism of Advaita as well. But what is the connection between doing regular ceremonial ritual and knowing your will, doing your will?
Well, I think that there is a connection with, I guess there are a few different ways you could connect it, but what really jumps to mind is this idea that he has in Duty, where you are to find yourself to be the center of your own universe, and connecting that with the idea of the secret door into the hidden center and secret of the sun, and some of the visualization aspects that you find in pretty much all of like the pentagram and hexagram rituals, where you are finding yourself to be in the center of like an equilibrated whatever, with different god forms on either side of you. I think that there's a few things that are going on in the visualization aspect. I mean, part of what Crowley says you're doing is you're just occupying the mind, right, until something better can come into it. So there's that aspect to it. I think that there is a kind of greater sense of intimacy that you can have with your own being that comes from doing those rituals. I don't know that there is. I mean, it depends also what you think your true will is. I mean, if you think that it's satisfying a particular object in life, well, then it all depends on whether you think doing a ritual is part of achieving that object, whatever it is, like getting a particular kind of job or relationship or what have you.
Right. So like if you believe there's like secret chiefs and that true will is your purpose, then magic would make sense to like contact these beings so they could tell you what your purpose is, basically.
It might be that, sure. Yeah. I mean, that seems to be some people seem to have that particular idea about it, I guess, that maybe somebody will show up and tell you, I guess. I don't know.
I suppose that it's like, suppose true will is a fittedness, right? It's
right.
an optimal fit between self and other, so that the self and the other, the self and the environment are both kind of mutually benefited by it in some way, or it's fruitful in some way, it fulfills their nature. With meditation that you're talking about, that kind of like radical decentralizing meditation where you're releasing your attachment, so to speak, or you're not being attached to these thoughts as they come up, I can understand that in the way that it might be helpful so that you can identify like what are the passing thoughts that might intrude upon this more natural flow state. Like I could see a connection between meditation and that concept of will, right? Where somehow the skills developed in meditation kind of make sense in terms of maintaining that optimal relatedness to the environment. I have a much harder time understanding how, say, like invoking Raphael might relate to that concept of true will, at least.
I think that the experience of meditating intensively, I don't really see as terribly strongly connected with any particular, like it's more like the relinquishment of will. It's kind of what you're aiming for with meditation. And yeah, there are flow states in it. There can be very strong flow states in it, but there's not, I would not say there's always a very strong connection between the states of meditation and the rest of one's life. I mean, this is really common that people will go on meditation retreats, have a big opening, spiritual opening, right? And then have to go back home, and it's, the world kind of comes crashing down on them.
Yeah.
And then they want to embrace a renunciate path because they think that all the cool stuff stopped happening because they came home and the modern world is completely sick and ill and they have to go live in the desert or on a mountain or something. And so you can get your own sort of like weird shadow aspects that come out of meditation. I don't think any spiritual path is completely free of them, especially when you're practicing alone without really good guidance. So that's the first word of caution that I would say. And I would say that from the other side, I think that you can get amazing flow states through different perceptual activities like visualizing angels or spirits, or equilibrated in the elements when doing Liber Samic or the LBRP, and the sense of the light above you of the holy guardian angel and anchoring you down into the center of the earth. I mean, is a very powerful visualization. I see the middle pillar a lot, actually. I was a big middle pillar practitioner because I did the Donald Michael Craig stuff, and I always loved the practice, and I would get like mild kind of Kundalini type stuff happening with middle pillar sometimes. So I wouldn't write any of it off necessarily. I think that any spiritual practice, and practiced intensively enough with a high enough degree of concentration and absorption, will start to kick off some things.
Something's going to happen, right? Yeah.
As far as the usefulness of it for the rest of your life, I don't know that. I mean, I guess I would push back and say, like, it's kind of questionable sometimes what good intensive meditation can do for somebody else's life, considering it can also be pretty destabilizing. So Yeah, I mean, the shadow aspects of
Yeah.
magic are obvious, right? It's like you're gonna think that you're a fucking wizard or the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley, or
Yeah.
that you're in a passionate, that all the drama of your life is actually, all your failed relationships are actually explained by the fact that you're chasing Babylon, and Babylon is like being incarnated in like, it's my holy guardian angel testing me, and that's why I have such a dysfunctional life. And I mean, I've seen everything.
Yeah, right. That's it's not uncommon. Yeah.
I've seen it all.
Yep. You're a wizard, Harry. There we
Mhm.
go. Yeah, if you guys in the chat have like questions or anything, you feel free to type them, and then I will put you on blast on this chat thing right here, and we can answer your question. Yeah. The magical universe. This music slaps. How do you hear music, man?
The drugs are killing him.
What music?
Drugs must be killing him right now.
So, a lot of people say Thelema is like meant to be an individual path. It's meant to be an individual spiritual path, and basically Crowley effed up by creating the OTO. I mean, he didn't create it. Let's not get into the history, but group work. Why would a Thelemite want to involve himself with anyone else? Why would you want to subject yourself to other human beings?
Oh, good lord. That's a question. Well, look, I mean, I can tell you as a person who has I've practiced solo, and I have been part of OTO, and I've been part of online groups as well, and I've been part of in-person groups, and
You've suffered a lot, in other words.
well, I suffered doing it alone too, and I suffer with other people, and it's like suffering is an unavoidable aspect of life, and after a while you realize most of your suffering is coming from the thoughts and patterns you're carrying around in the world.
That's right.
Rather than the other people.
Yeah,
I mean,
what's the common denominator here? It's you.
I mean, spiritual communities are notoriously toxic.
That's
I mean,
right.
I think everybody knows that, and we could go into the reasons for that. I have plenty of opinions on that, as I'm sure you do as well.
In general, yeah.
With regard to Thelema being an individualistic path, I think that's part of the reason that I'm attracted to it. Like, Crowley has this idea that, like, we're all kind of going up the mountain, and like, yeah, the end result is going to be somewhat similar in the sense that whatever, you're going to have this, breakthrough of the light of Neshama, and you're going to then cross the abyss, and there are going to be certain commonalities. But he also acknowledges that the circumstances of your incarnation have a huge impact on what that path up there is going to look like. And for some people, the path up is just permanently blocked. They're going to need another whatever,
Meaning, like, by virtue of the fact that you were born in poverty or something like that.
Yeah, or just just too thick to follow instructions.
Right, you're born with an extremely thick skull.
Very thick. You think
yeah.
you think you know better than the teacher, or you think you know better than the method, or you just lazy and don't want to apply
I'm in
it.
trouble.
So it's all perilous. It's all. I think it's all. I can't really say. The nice thing about a community is that a community can provide, what would you call it, discernment, right? So you're coming to me and you're talking about how you're enlightened. You got enlightened last night, and you're like surpassed Crowley and the Buddha and Lao Tse and all this stuff. You're like a super ipsisinus, and an actual skillful community would be able to deal with that in a skillful fashion. They wouldn't accept the claim, but they also wouldn't, like, whatever, call you a fucking idiot, or put it down completely. They would understand. Right. They would understand, like, oh, this is a person who, I don't know what stage you would call it in Thelema, but you're having like an arising and passing or a Kundalini event or something, and it's like you support them through it. You make sure they don't go into like a manic phase and go crash a car or something. Like, I saw this on meditation retreat. Like, some dude was clearly having a Kundalini awakening, and he was literally like running up and down the lawn in front of the place to just blow off steam. And they like put him to work with some manual labor to help him kind of focus what he was going through. They took care of him, and like he didn't have like a you know, like somebody seeing that from the outside would be like, this dude is having a manic episode, but he probably wasn't. He was probably having some kind of, you know, minor, you know, phenomenon that happens.
Yeah, and there's probably some overlap between mania and spiritual awakening, of course. But let's see here. It's Mr. Entelecheia.
Entelecheia. What are your thoughts on the Star Ruby and the Star Sapphire? So I like the Star Ruby. I practice the Star Ruby, actually. I really enjoy it, actually.
Over the LBRP. So like
I do.
instead
Well,
rather.
I like them both, actually. I get different vibe. I vibe differently off of them, actually.
How would you describe the vibe difference between LBRP and Star Ruby?
Um, the LBRP feels to me like a very balanced, kind of tranquil ritual. Once I have completed it, there's a sense of like holiness and balance and connection,
Mm-hmm.
and a kind of, you know, nice gentle expansion of the aura, sort of comes as advertised. I've been
Right.
practicing it for like a decade on and off, and you know,
You get what you pay for. Like you know what you're getting.
the Star Ruby is, I mean, it's just a more it's got more dynamic to it. It's
Mm-hmm.
got quiet parts and loud parts, sort of like, you know, sort of like the Pixies. And it's got that like explosive start to it with the Apopantos Kakodaimonos and
The Where Is My Mind part of the NOx signs.
exactly. Yeah, and you do the little song with you do your pion. Everybody does that a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there's also the sense of, I don't know, like for me, my problem with the Star Ruby is that I often forget what I'm saying in the Greek. I know how to say the Greek, but I don't. I sometimes forget it, like exactly what it is that I'm invoking. That can be the
Right.
problem with doing ritual in other language. Sometimes is that you can lose that connection. So, but generally, I get good, strong energy and visualizations off of it, and it's just a different vibe. And Star Sapphire, I'll admit, I don't know if I've ever practiced the Star Sapphire before, although I do know the Latin the Latin parts of it. It's a weird ritual because that's the one that Crowley said like revealed the ninth degree secret in it, and I've always kind of wondered exactly what he meant by that. And
Right.
but I've never actually practiced it, in part because I never really could imagine what I would be doing at certain parts of it. Like I could come up with certain interpretations.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty wild ritual signs, ritual positions that are supposed to go with the Sapphire.
That's the other
Um,
thing, is that it's supposed to be like, it's ostensibly supposed to be a sex magic working, which
right.
I'm not even sure it was, but that kind of also, I don't know, that's
I
not
think people
as
draw that
appealing.
conclusion from the reference to Ninth Degree, where it's like there must be some kind of sexiness going on here.
Sure.
But yeah, I I've heard it reveals the Ninth Degree. If anything, it conceals it, right? Because it ain't obvious what's going on in that ritual.
No.
Um, yeah, it's interesting that Crowley seemed to put such emphasis on Star Ruby, Star Sapphire, and he didn't really ever talk about them other than to say kind of what they are in general. But he never
Right.
really explained them, never explained the symbolism behind them, never, like, in Reguli at least, he wrote this long freaking essay. Salmic has this long essay. Star Ruby is just like one or two comments that we know about from different texts. That's kind of
Sure.
Crowley's thing, where it's like everything we know about a certain subject is like three quotes from three different texts and two footnotes from two obscure texts. It's basically how we understand things. You know, there's a lot of there's not many Thelemites these days who talk about much of anything, I would say. It seems that the topic is usually how to do these rituals that we were just talking about. Star Ruby,
Sure.
Star Sapphire, LBRP, Middle Pillar was the one I was trying to think of. Yeah, and there's obviously value to these rituals. However, you come at it from a philosophical standpoint. Obviously, theory is important to you. Do you think that the average Thelemite needs to understand philosophy in order to do their true will, or do they need to know magic? Is there one that's more important?
No, I mean, I have a very flexible attitude toward this. I do the theory because that's what I'm just drawn to,
Personally?
essentially. Yeah. I think you need enough theory to like get you started. I don't know, maybe this is like my Buddhist background, but I feel like, in Buddhism, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. So
Right.
you need that doesn't mean that you have a complete penetrating intellectual understanding of reality. It just means that you understand like the first noble truth, basically.
You understand why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah, you understand what the situation is. You understand that there's why we're in the position we're in. You understand that there's a path out of it, and you know where to put your foot first, right? And then you've got the moral teachings after that, and then you've got the practical meditation teachings after that. So you just need enough theory to really understand that there's a way out. Sort of like a
Enough.
person
Yeah.
who like it's like a person who's sick with something, and it's like, okay, there's a doctor's office, it's like down the street, you're going to go over here, you're going to make a right and a left, and knock 3 times on the door. So I would say that as far as Thelema goes, it would be nice to have that kind of a concise sort of, like, here's just the amount of theory that you need
Mm.
to get this or to do this. And I don't think we even really have that, to be honest with you. I think it really tends to go in like a very minimalist kind of like, oh, you don't have to know it. The less you know, the better. It's like what? Like you
Right.
get this attitude sometimes, like the less you think about it, the better. Just do it.
Right. It's
Just
about the
just
work.
do the work. And it's like, well, okay,
What
like
work and why and
what's the
how
work?
and
What's
yeah.
the work? And
Yeah.
like
No
what's
one
the
ever
like? What are
knows
you
what the
looking for?
work is. Yeah. Usually
I
just
mean, it
means
would be
shut up.
different. It would be different even if you could say to somebody like, okay, well, when you do these practices, here are some of the results that you can expect, and here's how our community is going to help you interpret the results and bring you to, there would be at least be some structure there that would guide a person. But
That would
I think
require a tradition. Yeah.
that would require a tradition, and I guess ostensibly they have that in AA. I wouldn't really know. I mean, I guess the
Maybe.
guidance probably varies, dramatically depending on who you're working with, but theoretically that's what that would be for. So but if you're not even doing that, it's like, yeah, I don't know, like, do the star ruby every day and dot 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 profit. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know what's
Right.
supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the issues I have. I think an ongoing issue with Thelema is my understanding of Thelema, my understanding of true will, my understanding of like the nature of reality and what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. I can grasp the true will concepts. I can grasp every moment is love under will. I do find it hard to understand why ceremonial ritual is the privileged form of practice within the tradition, in the sense of like, suppose you wanted to have optimal fittedness between you and the environment, you need ceremonial magic. It's just like, wait, what's the connection here? Why is this tradition so heavily steeped in this particular form of spiritual practice? It must have some particular relationship to the philosophy or some particular privileged results that are relevant to the philosophy. I can't say that I've particularly found that myself, which is why I've continued to emphasize the mysticism aspect of it. Like, for example, I think that, like, just to be kind of crass about it, like, dropping a bunch of acid is probably going to get you farther than doing a bunch of LBRPs. Of course, I don't think inherently anyone's going to have some great experiences on LSD, but you're at least going to experience something. Something's going to shift, something's going to change that is probably more profound than yelling some Hebrew you don't understand at the walls a few times. What do you think about all that? Like, I suppose I don't have an answer of like what practice would be most tailored to that particular philosophy, but it feels to me that it's almost like it's like this weird perpendicular angle to it. Like I don't quite get how they run so parallel, or how people see it so obvious that an LBRP is related to finding your true will and doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just don't really like. I agree with you that I don't think there's any necessary connection between doing an LBRP or Star Ruby or any of it and knowing what your true will is. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that there is, but I don't think that there's necessarily a relationship between like meditation or mystical experience either, knowing what you're supposed to do with your life. Like, I mean, I never came out of my, you know, experiences, my peak experiences or my baseline shifts with suddenly like, oh, now I know, you know, I'm gonna do this on Monday. It's like, if anything, it's the
Right.
exact opposite. It's like,
Throws everything into question, and yeah.
it is. It makes me realize, like, probably the biggest realization that I had, or one of the big realizations I had after that big sort of like, you know, Satori-like experience that I mentioned was that everything that I had considered to be spiritual progress up until that point was really just like walking in place. That I thought I had been going somewhere and I had not. It was more like the Pac-Man effect. Like I went off the right side of the screen and came in on the left side. I was like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that
Back
was
where you started.
unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it changed my opinion about the whole notion of like progress and the connection with spiritual practice. I would say like I try to go at it from like an orthogonal kind of angle. I try to break people's sense that spiritual practice necessarily accomplishes anything, no matter what it is. What I would say to people, what I would suggest to somebody if they, whether they were doing magic or whether they were doing meditation or whether they were doing some other, I don't know, take your pick, would be to commit yourself to something for a year, doing it every day, because it seems to me that the commitment is the common denominator that I've noticed
Hmm.
when people have any kind of breakthrough. And you know, if I don't notice many people have breakthroughs doing ceremonial magic, but I don't know many people that practice ceremonial magic all that seriously. Most people
Right.
practice it in kind of a desultory manner. So, I mean,
That's
I
true.
don't, I don't think we know. Yeah, like you know, well, I want to hex this person who said something bad to me. Like, I don't think that's going to do anything either to the person having the spell cast on them and the person doing the spell. You know what I mean? So, I think it's poorly understood. I was very intrigued by that study that you shared with me out of University of Toronto with Jensen Kim and his colleagues, where they
Oh,
had. I
right.
mean, it was a very perfunctory kind of
The one
study, but
posted
basically,
on Reddit. Is that right?
yeah, I think yeah, it was on Reddit, and you shared it with me, and I've looked. It didn't really conclude anything other than just like having any spiritual practice is better than nothing, which actually kind of fits what I would expect. That
That's nice. It's better than is not significantly different from just chilling out. You know. Woo, let's fucking go. All right, thanks for the follow, man.
excellent. We're
Excellent.
going.
I think
We're
he
we're like
enjoys
Hadid.
what you're saying.
Good.
Sweet. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you guys
we're Hadiding it up.
exactly, if you guys have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. We'll put you on blast on the screen
Yes.
and potentially answer the question. We'll see. We'll see.
Right
All
on.
right, man. Yeah. My name is the screen name you see there.
Yeah, really.
Um, ceremonial magic must give you the shivers afterward. Yeah, it does seem like ceremonial magic does try to access. We were talking about dramatic ritual, right? So drama, right? So the same things drama accesses. The various levels of emotion and experience, tries to conjure up something, some kind of experience, something significant, whereas meditation often is almost the exact opposite, like a radical detachment from everything, no matter what. I don't know if it needs to give you the shivers, but yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Oh, it's enchilada. Oh man, is it you? Shit.
Oh, darn. It's the green sauce, not the mole. Shit.
Yeah, exactly. Um, let's see. Shiver me. It shivers me timbers. Yes. You gotta
That's the
love Twitch
star
chat.
sapphire.
The Star Sapphire. If it doesn't shiver your timbers, then you're not doing it right.
No. God.
All right. If you guys have any like legit questions, feel free to type them in the chat. You can type the non-legit ones too, but I will just make fun of them and or ignore them.
Come on in.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer we're gonna go. Anyways, we've already been going like an hour almost. Appreciate you joining us and trying out the live streaming thing. it's nice. We haven't been too harassed by anyone or anything. It's just like
No.
it's totally peaceful.
Yeah. Is it usually peaceful? Does it get rowdy?
I mean, there's one guy that always harasses me about what my favorite Enrique Iglesias song is, but I
Well, what is
really,
it?
it's by Lamos, of course. I
Okay.
don't know any other song, honestly.
Okay.
I had to look it up because he kept asking me.
Fair.
Um, but yeah, we'll see how the rest of this goes. So what is the biggest mistake that you think people who talk about Thelema, people who teach Thelema, people who put on classes, who try to teach other people about Thelema at OTO or otherwise, not necessarily like Duquette, Shoemaker, myself, or whatever, but anyone. What do you feel like is the most repetitive mistake or most common mistake people make?
Hmm.
Is there a single one that you see?
I don't know if there's a single mistake. I mean, there probably is. It just seems to me like people focus on the way that it's interpreted, it ends up not having a lot of texture, it ends up like not having a lot of thickness or structure. So it ends up looking like either, ceremonial magic with like a glaze of, liberalism or libertarianism on
Mm-hmm.
top, or the other way around, right? Like it's a feast of liberalism with some ceremonial magic on top, like cracked pepper. And it's like, it's not really
So it's
clear
like
to
it's
me.
their existing political views, but you also do the LBRP or something like that.
Yeah, or you at least talk about the LBRP. You
Right.
don't have to you don't have to do it. You can just
Right. You
talk about
definitely have
it.
to have a lot of classes about it though.
You have to have classes about it, or it's like, sort of general interest in astrology, plus you have some Crowley books on your shelf. Like it's not really clear what work any of it's doing. So like the stuff you were talking about before, like in terms of, well, what good is X, Y, or Z for doing your will? The fact of the matter is, like, I mean, you were kind of like basically asking that about ceremonial magic in particular, but I would just ask that question about anything. There's like
Yeah.
no clear connection at all between any set of practices or methods and doing your will. There's not even a clear idea of what the hell doing one's will even looks
Right.
like.
Take a step
So
back. Yeah.
how do you answer the question, like to answer the question of ceremony? I can't answer the question about ceremonial magic if I'm not even sure how to answer any of the other questions either. Like to me, like I think it would be benefited enormously even if somebody just came along and talked about in a very candid way like what it's like to walk this path. That could be from just the level of like lifestyle choices, or it could be um like how does your understanding of living in a thelemic universe affect the course of your life and how you feel about things and like how you relate to yourself, to people, and to the world. Like for me, that structure is very thick and intricate and alive for me. Like I definitely experience the world in a thelemic way. It means something to me, and for me it's definitely not like voting for Biden and I just happen to have like some pewter jewelry or something. Like that's not what it's about
A
for me.
lot of pewter jewelry.
Yeah, and the long black trench coat, and
I mean, we are both wearing black, so let's not be too harsh on our aesthetic judgments because I don't want to look like too big of a hypocrite. But no,
right.
yeah,
So just not developing it, not really like digging in and thinking about the implications and the assumptions, just boiling it down to these kind of just what are they called, like just catchphrases or
mm-hmm. Catchphrases,
sayings.
right?
Yeah, and
I
then
think people are really satisfied when they hear a catchphrase. They just feel really satisfied. Like for example, one that I read recently, and I know you've heard this before. Stop me if you haven't. Ask 10 Thelemites a question, get more than 10 answers, right?
yeah.
Things like that. Things where it's like you say it and you're like, yeah, I said something clever. And then the other person's like, oh, that's clever. And then like it just, and then we're done,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing ever happens. I think what you're saying is like people who have studied this and lived their lives and kind of undergone this natural process of applying all of these ideas into their life in a way that is much more kind of like natural than contrived, right? Where it's like, I've been studying Thelema, I've been doing these rituals, and I've been trying to raise a family, for example. And then naturally those principles have kind of popped up as I've been thinking about raising a child, for example. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, why aren't there any skeptical? Why aren't there any skeptical Thelemites? Like, why aren't there any Thelemites that are openly doubting the applicability of this to raising a child or using it in the workforce or doing anything? Like, that would be a sign of like immense progress if people were like,
Right.
what the fuck? This doesn't fucking work. Why is everybody saying that it works? Why is it everybody says that it works? That doesn't make sense. Name one thing that works for everybody where there's just no problems with it. It's just like it works for everything. Wash, rinse, repeat.
To you,
That's not life.
that's a great sign that something is happening, that something's being grappled with, basically.
I've gone through like probably 4 or 5 crises of faith, so to speak, with Thelema, where where I've said to people like, yeah, I don't think I believe in this at all, or this just seems like nonsense, or even this just seems like poison. I don't think anybody should be doing this at all. I never really. It's very rare that I find other people saying things like that. Instead, I
Right.
hear things like, well, if it works, it works. It should just work. That's the point of it. It's like, well, why don't you break it? Why don't you break the thing? Break it. Figure out how to break it. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, everything that I like to use, I want to break it. I want to know where it breaks. Like, why aren't you breaking things? Like, that's not the spirit of Thelema to me. The spirit of Thelema is that you should figure out how to break things.
Right. Well, that's actually kind of like trying it out. That's using it, whereas it appears to be more of like an ornamental bauble you put on your shelf, and it's like,
It's a life. Yeah, it's like a
right.
general lifestyle thing.
Or it's
Yeah,
like,
so
I'm a
maybe
Thelemite. Yeah.
maybe that's the answer to that question. Like, the biggest mistake people make is that they don't push it or themselves hard enough. They don't push it to the edge. They're not really challenging themselves with it. They're settling
What's
for
the
really simple
implications of all
areas.
this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think that's an interesting point where Thelema itself requires
This dude in here is
crises.
saying, this dude in here, I'm sorry, this dude in here is saying there's tons of skeptical Thelemites. That's bullshit.
What? Where
That
do you
is
see that?
bullshit.
Oh, I see it. I see him now.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Let's put him on blast.
Put him on blast. That's bullshit right there. That's what I'm
Who
saying.
are the
That's what I'm calling
skeptical
out.
Thelemites? Well, so this is the different. This is the problem here, right? So what Entelecheia talks about with consensus Thelema is this kind of like veneer of appearing to be like intellectually skeptical and so on, when actually it is more like a way of dismissing the issue rather than being truly skeptical of it. Do you think that's a fair summary of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like the difference between what Curly talks about. He has like, how does he describe it in, what's that essay? The Soldier and the Hunchback. He's like, there's like the true skepticism, and then there's like the skepticism for wimps. There's the wimpy skepticism, right?
Right, exactly.
Right. There's like the manly skepticism, and then there's like, however he puts it. No, you should wreck your ship. People should wreck their ships more on this stuff. They should enter into a crisis with it. I never hear anybody talk about a crisis of belief. And I mean, crisis of faith is actually a pretty good actually description of it. I know faith is a
Yeah.
bad word in Thelema, but it is like that.
It is. It has to be though. I think. There's. I always encounter these people who are like, Thelema said everything I already believed, and it's like, what?
Right, exactly.
What Thelema are you reading? Because the stuff I was reading is kind of out there, and there's no way I believed that before. And are you truly like being honest with your own beliefs? Are you truly being honest with Thelema? It's very hard to tell.
That article that you wrote like a year and a half ago, where you basically pointed out that there are all these ambiguities around true will. Like, I really very rarely see that kind of like analysis done of central basic concepts to show like, yeah, the central basic thing that we're all taking for granted has at least 3 different, meanings to it. Like,
Yeah.
that's a how do we deal with that problem? But like, if you're not even sensitive to the idea that there could be a problem, or if you just wave it away and say like, well, it's whatever you need it to be, or I don't know, like whatever hand waving people want to do, it's like, well, how are you ever going to enter into a sense of puzzlement? And if you can't enter into a sense of puzzlement, how are you ever going to enter into a sense of amazement?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, it's like that requires grappling with things, right? That's what I mean. Is like people just kind of like they're like, here's an idea, I like that. Like there's no real grappling with these things. Like, so how does it work? How does it apply? Is it real? Does it apply to my life? These kinds of things. It just seems like I think that if I were to say there was one issue, I guess I would agree that people are just profoundly uncurious about these things, and don't quite think them through to their end, and just all their implications for their own life, for their own philosophy. And then naturally, if they did, it's not that they would figure everything out, it's that they would come to these crises. They would come to grapple with these problems. I know there was a point many times where I thought like the concept of true will is just complete BS. It just doesn't make any sense, and just like trying to find these new ways of understanding it that feel true to me. And then that article you mentioned, it's like I was already a Thelemite, I guess, for like 15 years. And then I wrote an article being like, this central concept of true will actually has multiple definitions. Right? So it's like even 15 years later, being like, wait a second. Actually, the central concept everything turns around has like some complexity or nuance that other people haven't really discussed. It's very I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's just like it really is truly rare to find people grappling with these concepts in a way that isn't just a recapitulation of the same grappling of like true will isn't want, you know? And it's like, yeah, we've done that. We've been
right.
there. We've been there 50, 100 times. Like, what about the monad, you know? What about this idea of the one? What about this idea of 0 equals 2? All right. So I've seen very, very little grappling with those things. Honestly, I've seen very little like exposition or understanding to begin with, let alone grappling with them. And that's kind of what I was talking about with my question of like, how are these things related? Like you mentioned, how do we even tie practice to theory and so on? Those are things that I think. Were we to have a, I don't know, not Thelema 2.0, but like a new revival of the current of the tradition, we'd have to grapple with these questions. The basic, like most fundamental theological questions of like what actually is, how do we do it, and what's the best way to do it. This guy, are we spamming Adenoke? Are we spamming chat?
Yes. Sort of. Yeah.
Is he praising me too? A little flattery will get you a long way, so I won't ban you. I sold all my Crowley books once, there Karen says. I sold a lot of mine too, actually. You know, I love books. I love information and reading and philosophy, but I think it's unambiguous that a lot of Thelemites are total fetishists for objects, like occult objects.
They really are.
Of which books are the primary like form.
That's true.
Unless it's my books, then you're perfectly justified to own all of them.
Naturally.
Naturally. Let's see here. Most of these are one guy just spamming. Time to call an ecumenical council. That's right. So last time we talked, we were called the Council of Nicaea or something like that.
It was misspelled too. It was great. I love it.
It was the Nice Council.
It was a really nice council.
Ban myself, go to my own platform. I'm just joking, man. I appreciate you're here. I don't know exactly who you are. I have my guesses, but I do appreciate you being here. If anyone else has any questions, any comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I don't know how long Entelecheia will endure us, but I appreciate you coming on here.
I'll hang out a little bit longer.
Cool.
I downloaded an episode of The Last of Us. I've got to watch that.
Oh yeah, you watching Last of Us?
Yeah, I got to watch the latest one.
Yeah, I haven't started because I really don't like this whole waiting a week thing. But then again, like you get a lot of spoilers if you don't watch it week to week. So like I already know what episode 3 is all about, and I haven't even started episode 1. So I'll ban myself. Yeah, indeed. Okay, cool. Go and ban yourself, sir.
I think it's hilarious, the
Yeah.
idea that like just having a discussion about theology is like it goes from there immediately to ecumenical council. Like, could you imagine how badass would it be if we had an actual ecumenical council
That
in
would be so
Thelema
cool.
that like caused a split, like a split in the church, and they're
That's
like, "Ugh,"
right.
and they divided into two camps that were
It's like
clearly opposed.
Western Champagne versus Eastern Orthodox.
It would be like it would be like 1,000 years worth of progress in Thelema instantly.
It truly would. I think I used to have this view that like we need more conflict, we need more battles, we need more arguments, we need more like organizations. But the truth is, I'll say it. You don't have to say it. The truth is that people just kind of are quite like mediocre, and they just recapitulate the same themes over and over again. So I was like, we need new organizations, and then everyone was like, yeah, we'll do like a new OTO 500 times over. And it's like, no, that's not what I meant. I meant like new, like something new. Maybe aping one of the million other organizational styles out there in the world, other than a hierarchical occult order. But yeah, we'll see if that actually comes to be. I watch Hogan's Heroes. Good for you, man.
No, thank goodness.
I was wondering what you were watching, and now
Yeah,
I know.
really.
Baptist Church 2.0. Yeah, wouldn't that be great? So people make fun of organized religion in Thelema all the time. There's a great, it's like a profound underlying fear of dogma in Thelema, where it's like
Right.
anything that even appears to be like confident of itself
Right.
needs to be attacked immediately, right? You're the council of niceness or whatever. You just have to like drag it down somehow. Of course, unless it's like, someone that has that soft social power like Lon Duquette, he's okay to throw out things every once in a while. But like truly, whenever we try to lay down anything about what Thelema is, we get it's like this tidal wave of backlash where it's like you can't say what it is, you can't say anything about it, and it's like a truly disturbing trend. Not even trend. It's really taken a hold of the entire culture, so that it's really hard to push the culture in any particular direction. It kind of just like sits in this plateau, this homeostasis, where it's just like whatever goes, whatever works, that kind of thing. And whenever whenever anyone says something, it's like Baptist Church 2.0, Council of Nicaea, Ecumenical Council. And I really don't quite understand why people feel so threatened by a few people just talking about or trying to understand better or clarify the central doctrine. I know you're saying it jokingly, my man. But there are for sure people out there who say it for real.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100% earnestly, not a shred of irony about it. Yeah, it was very hard for me to write that consensus thelema article because it's so hard to like pin people down on anything. Like you have
Right.
to really step back at it and look at it like you're an alien visiting from another planet to see the dogma in it. And that's why it hasn't split. That's why nobody has gone off to form an alternative. It's because it's like Thelema as it is just kind of hides in vagueness about
Mm-hmm.
things and
Right.
hides in subjectivity. And so to even be able to outline the contours at all of what it is, I think is kind of sloppily as I did, is I think a step in the right direction, because at least you're able to point to the underlying assumptions and challenge them. The really difficult thing is this dogma that there is no dogma, because then it
Right.
means that you can't challenge anything. And
It's
that's why I say it's
impossible.
like
Yeah.
that's why I say it's highly authoritarian the way it's set up, because it's not that it's undogmatic, it's the denial that there is dogma. If they were just like if they were just like authoritarian, if like OTO were keeping, or like the Thelemic Church were like keeping like slaves or whatever, like Scientology does,
Right.
at least there'd be something to like push against. You know what I mean? It's like you
There's
need
nothing
something to
there
push
though.
against.
Yeah.
You need something to push against. It's too liberal and postmodern. Your hand goes right through it as soon as you try to touch it.
Right.
And
There's no
so
substance. Yeah. There's nothing to push against. That's
yeah,
right.
everybody's in own little world.
Hey man, I have a real question. I doubt that, but how did you balance being Jewish with Thelemic cosmology? I assume that's for me. I don't think you're Jewish in Entelecheia, is that right? I
Mm.
am Jewish by heritage, but I don't really understand why there would be a contradiction to begin with.
You only practice the hexagram rituals.
That's right. I only do the Star Sapphire in a very secret manner.
Yeah.
Jebert, 1988. Appreciate the. Oh, you gifted a tier sub to Jebert. It was all worth it. I don't know. It was all worth enduring your chats for that one gift sub. Um,
Generous.
you know, I think actually Jews are highly overrepresented in Thelema. Overrepresented
Really?
in the sense of statistically speaking, there aren't many Jews in the world,
Hmm.
and there's hella Jews that are into Thelema. At least culturally speaking, I wouldn't consider myself a Jew except like by birth, by culture. But does seem to be a high level of them into Thelema. Not that I'm talking about the Globo conspiracy, but exactly. Uh-oh, he made the symbol. You're not supposed to show people that, man. You're supposed to wait. Hell no.
Are there that are I had not taken notice of that there were so many Jews. I mean, the only
Really?
one I could
Yeah.
think of besides you was
Good for you.
our friend Jim Wasserman, who
With
recently departed.
Wasserman, I believe Sabazia's has some heritage there.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Um,
Wow.
as I'm gonna assume anyone named David probably has some heritage there, but maybe that's a false assumption.
Okay.
Sab does. Which Sab? Oh, Sabazia's. Right. Gotcha.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, Jews have been part of many different traditions, including atheistic ones,
Sure.
existential atheistic ones. So it's not that crazy for them to be part of a different theological tradition, especially one that draws on slash apes the Kabbalistic tradition so frequently. But it is obvious that Thelemic Kabbalah is not Jewish Kabbalah, as I'm sure you would agree, Adonok.
True. He says
Yeah,
true.
yeah. It's actually something it relates to what you were just saying, where it's like Jewish mysticism is not hermetic, or Jewish Kabbalah is not hermetic Kabbalah because Jewish Kabbalah actually has a real tradition behind it.
Hmm.
There's like this real historical, like all these different rabbis and people contributing to it. Hermetic Kabbalah is very flat. It's very like there was what's his face? Agrippa, there was Levi, there was Crowley, and they all like did these attributions and we accept them.
Hmm.
And it's just like it's kind of a flat tradition, whereas there's just like all these contributions to Jewish Kabbalah. I mean, you know who I am. Yeah, I do now. Of course I do. Indeed, you confirmed that. Appreciate you coming here, but brother, my Muslim father. Okay, cool. I'm not gonna post that one,
Oh,
but
excellent.
excellent,
Good to
excellent,
know.
Sarah Kern. Good to know. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, it seems to me like Crowley really leaned into what he saw as like the metaphysics underlying Kabbalah. Like he really took that and like he was interested obviously in the attributions and stuff like that, but he
Yeah,
makes like Ein and Ein Sof a really big part of his worldview with a lot of different mystical and intellectual significance. He gets
this
it
is true.
from the Mathers. He got that from Mathers too. But
That's the thing is like all of his Jewish Kabbalah is through a hermetic source, like
right,
Mathers, right? Yeah.
yeah,
I do think you're serious, Sarah Karen. I just am not going to post that on the video. But
okay.
I do appreciate your chat, yeah. Um so what are some things you're working on? What are some texts, some ideas that you're working on? Anything like that?
Yeah, right now I'm working on two things. I'm writing a lecture on Liber Resh, which I definitely
Resh.
have to give a month from now, and
Is that an OTO lecture or something like that?
it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing it through Horizon,
There's
and
an actual deadline for that.
there is an actual deadline. I have to do it, I think a month from today. So that gives me some time to do that. And I'm doing Spinoza was not big into the Kabbalah. That's a misunderstanding
What?
of
Spinoza
Spinoza.
was big on it.
Not everyone who's Jewish is into the
Yeah.
Kabbalah, guys.
What the hell, man? Just because his
No, I
name is
know that.
Baruch.
I know that because I read an essay on that recently.
Okay. Like specifically about Spinoza and Kabbalah?
Yeah, he was accused in the 17th century of being a Kabbalist.
Oh.
But he only really mentioned Kabbalah once in like a letter to somebody, and he wasn't terribly interested in it himself. Yeah.
Wow. And then
But
hundreds, and then now, like, people still believe he's into Kabbalah and stuff.
yeah, I guess so.
Thank you for the gift. I don't know, Midwich. Show your appreciation to this crazy guy. Yeah, so you're working on Resh.
And the other thing I'm doing is I'm writing a lecture on the Creed.
Oh, really? Okay, so that's a thing that a lot of people are interested in is like analyses of the creed. At least people in OTO, I should say.
I guess so. Yeah, we had two people recently go through baptism, and I wanted to give them, kind of basic lecture on it. The problem is that anytime I sit down to write this, it's like it's not basic.
Right.
I end up going through the whole thing and laying everything out, and I'm realizing that this is probably at least a short book that I've got here when I finish this whole thing. So that's what I would like to do. I'd like to write a book on Thelemic theology. That's one of the projects that I have in front
that
of
would
me.
be lit, as the kids say.
It probably would be, yeah. And yeah, I'm thinking about taking the lectures that I've done for the last 4 or 5 years and putting them together in a book, because I have probably 150, 200 pages worth of lectures at this point.
I mean, your lectures are like 2 hours long on those YouTube videos, so yeah.
They're long lectures, and I've done a bunch of them at this point, and I think that would probably be like a easy base hit to just kind of put those together. So
and based as well.
And based. So yeah, as soon as I get done with this Resh thing and this Creed thing, I need to write like a short Creed thing that I could say in like an hour. Like, okay, this is basically what it is, right? So this way I'm not working on it for a year. I think
that is difficult. Yeah.
That's the plan. So yeah, I've always got irons in the fire. I'm a very I write constantly, and I'm always looking at something.
In my time in OTO, I have to say at least it did inspire me to write things about various topics. Engaging in the initiation rituals, engaging in the Gnostic Mass. Naturally, at least for me, wanted to try to understand what the hell it was that I was doing and like swearing to and so on. So I do think that is a valuable part, is just kind of inundating your consciousness with MMM and EGC. And that language starts to kind of filter into just the way you think about things, right? So, even in my name, 131, like ultimately that comes back to 1 and 3 and 3 and 1. That is from the Gnostic Mass. So as much as I hate on it, there's definitely a profound influence from OTO and its rituals. I do think Crowley kind of not necessarily knocked it out of the park, but MMM in particular are the Man of Earth. I mean, are particularly cool rituals that he wrote. And the Gnostic Mass, of course. I mean, I wrote a 400-page book on it, so I would assume I cared about it a little bit. But I do think that partaking in these rituals and experiencing them and really grappling with them, not just passively going through them, but really grappling with the symbols and such, they do have a real value that is worth preserving.
For me, the most exciting work that I do connected with Thelema is basically going into these initiation rituals or going into the Gnostic Mass or going really into any aspect of Thelema. But I tend to do it through the OTO material just because I'm there. But like going into it and discovering like really unexpected, like awesome, cool things in it, and then getting to share those with other people and them also appreciating what's awesome in it. So my favorite thing to do right now is to work with new people who are coming in, like who have just gone through the Minerval, and to show them like, here are all the cool things that are, tied up in this little ritual, or, same thing with the Gnostic Mass. Now that somebody's done baptism, And it works best with people who are new coming into it because they're still curious and actually looking for something. They
Right.
haven't like filled their heads up with a bunch of like, oh, it's just blah blah blah. You know, they haven't figured out everything already. So like the new people are more like me. They're like they don't know stuff. Like I'm a person who's always discovering
Right.
things and finding.
Beware
I'm like
anyone that knows everything.
yeah, I like I if I had figured this out 10 years ago, I would have stopped 10 years ago. I wouldn't be here. It
Right.
would be really boring. Like what am I staying for? The bit some bad red
Just to
wine
feel
or some
cool.
yeah. So no, it's a process of discovery for me and exploration and being awestruck by things. I think Crowley had a tremendous mind, and I think he was the real deal in terms of being a spiritual seeker and
Right.
explorer and he had great facility with language sometimes and managed to put a lot of it down and left a lot of breadcrumbs for us and it's alive for me and I try to make other people experience that aliveness, so it's
That's great.
tremendous fun for me.
That's great. Yeah. Our mutual friend Shetel, I talked to him and he often says this line of like, why tie yourself to basically this crazy guy, Aleister Crowley, right? Why marry yourself to this insane tradition? Why invite social rejection and confusion when you could just be a Unitarian Universalist or something like that? You could just be any number of things that are similar but not so in your face, not so weird, not so transgressive. For me personally, there's something about Crowley where I don't believe everything he says. I don't agree with everything he says. However, at the same time, there's something in his writing where I can see there's a very earnest seeker. There's someone who grappled with very similar concepts to the ones I've grappled with, and has put a lot of time and energy, his entire life basically, into trying to articulate this new perspective. One that I think unites a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different trends and threads throughout history. That for me, regardless of how weird my own personal philosophy is or how much it might match up with Thelema, there's something intrinsically that feels like, there's something alive. There's something worth studying. There's something worth looking through there, basically. Something that that doesn't draw me the same way as, say, like basic Jewish mysticism, right? Even though I grew up Jewish. Something that doesn't draw me in the same way as astrology or even like certain philosophies, Neoplatonic or something like that. So in the end, it's got to come from a kind of non-rational place, in a way, something that speaks to a level of your being that feels right. Something that's like true will, I guess, in some way. And maybe some people's true will isn't to be with Thelema in particular, ironically.
Right.
But it does seem like there's something about it that is worth looking into. It's just that when you do look into it, a lot of the contemporary Thelemites have tried to explain it, but perhaps unintentionally flattened it in certain ways. And I think I'm personally to blame in some ways because I followed that trend. But I'm willing to examine that and try to correct it as well. How many subs are you? Oh no, that's just you subbing. Okay, I don't know. Okay. Hey, actually, why did you leave OTO? Me?
He must mean you.
I know Marco is super chatty, but seriously, what happened? I left because I got burnt out. I left a long time ago. Yeah. I like the shortest answer is I got totally burnt out, 100%. Yep. I was master of Blazing Star Oasis, top of the world, right chartered initiator, ordained priest, local body master, all the check boxes that you might want to check. However, I think really it's a great example of like true will in real life. where
Sure.
eventually it was just like every part of my being was rejecting it. Not because OTO itself is intrinsically evil or something, but it wasn't for me at that point. And every part of my being was trying to tell me that socially it was toxic for me. Physically I was unhealthy, trying to attend all these things. Mentally I was in a very negative state, always thinking about all this drama or whatever. And so eventually that comes to a point where like the cognitive dissonance, the like ego dystonic state is just unbearable and you have to get out of there. So that's what happened for me. And for people that persist, good luck. And yeah, I thought that I could do some good as well. And I respect anyone that tries to do that tries to make a system better and tries to leave it better than the way they came in. Like, how can you not respect someone that at least tries that?
Yeah, I'm trying to really convey to new people that are coming to give them the tools to avoid the burnout and to show them how
Right.
to avoid the drama and to show them how and to take away some of the opacity and to make things more transparent and to make things
It can
more
be quite
accessible.
opaque, yeah.
There are a lot of problems with the way that it's done, and I think that it kind of selects for people that are often very driven and self-driven, which can also select for burnout. I wish
That's
I could
right.
write like a survival guide or something for
Hmm.
how to like make it in OTO, because I think that I've seen a lot of good people over the years just get tired of it for one reason or another, for reasons that in my opinion aren't terribly good. Like
Hmm.
their reasons for leaving are good, I understand, but like
It doesn't
if
have to be
somebody
that way.
if somebody leaves OTO because they just don't believe in Thelema or just don't believe in the system of OTO, or if it's some kind of core fundamental disagreement like that, to me that's great because they learned something about themselves.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I applaud that. When people leave because um, some kind of some complaint isn't taken seriously or isn't dealt with properly or
Yeah.
something of that nature, when it's something along those lines, I feel a lot of sorrow over that because I know that we just lost somebody for no good damn reason at all, and
Yeah.
that's not good. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah.
I try to convey to people that I try to give them the tools to have the most success out of this as possible. I'm trying to shift that into a more like to bring more light to that and more understanding.
That's great. Well, it's like that's how it should start is people truly understanding what OTO should be, what Thelema should be, and then trying to create an organization that is healthy, right? Socially, psychologically speaking, one that isn't just based strictly on social cohesion, but on shared goals and shared values. That's always going to be more successful. So I wish anyone that tries to make that happen, I wish them success. I'm not going to help you with
That's okay. You've been you and
it.
others have been an inspiration already. You did tremendous work in OTO. I mean, I told you you're actually part of the reason I got into OTO because I was, I caught speech in the silence, and I
That's
was like,
right.
wow,
Oh
this is
yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah.
this is like really hip organization. What the hell's going on here?
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, bait
It's
and
it.
switch.
I do like this idea of supporting other Thelemites, right? Like how many again, not trying to toot my own horn. How many people are like having other Thelemites on, trying to promote their stuff, collaboration, that kind of thing? I see very little of it, really,
Yeah.
frankly. And it's very insular, the things that do happen. So I would love more collaboration, more openness, more transparency, rather than just being like, hey, let's just create OTO slightly different, like a new version of OTO somewhere else that never succeeds or something like that. I'd
Yeah.
rather instead of splitting constantly, I'd rather like maybe we come together, share ideas. Of course, we're not going to agree on everything. If we did, that would probably be a huge problem. But at least we would be able to share and argue and so on.
Yeah, the fact that people can't seem to break free of the Masonic model or like the, Hogwarts model, I think is pretty damning. It's like that's a lack of imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, not all of us need napkins on our lap in order to do Thelema. Not all of us need to yell Hebrew at the walls. So, I know you're a proud member of Hogwarts, my dude. Of course you are.
Nice,
But
yeah.
but yeah, I think that's something Crowley himself was trying to get at. Like he even said like OTO needs to be completely reformed. Like at the end of his life, he was like it needs to be reformed, of course around the secret, but like
Right.
more Blee Equinox model. He even said like the secrets of the like degrees are basically BS because people like Gerald York are just going to publish them anyways. Um, but I think what he was getting at, he's like, we need a new organizational structure. We need new forms of organizations to carry Thelema forward. There's a big push for decentralized Thelema. I think there's great danger in those things as well. Because of course they generally tend to turn into ironically like personality cults.
They do, yeah.
They're like, oh, we're so decentralized around me. Oh, right, of course.
Yeah.
But there's so many organizations out there, like even just like Christians. Like look at all the way Christians form organizations to gather, to share ideas, to organize together. Old eon structures. Yes, masonry would be an old eon structure, I guess. There might be some value, but it's like I think Crowley, even back in the 40s, was like, this is too cumbersome. You know, like in order to spread the law, to make someone like physically come here, go through all these rituals, then go through like a symbolism lecture and so on. It's pretty cumbersome. There's got to be other ways. He might have thought of like, you know, if he was around now, he would probably be like a, you know, Pugger's Twitch streamer or something like that.
For sure. Well, it's I think that I'm gonna be bouncing off this call.
Alrighty.
It's been good talking with you.
93, sir. Thank you for staying. It's almost like an hour and a half or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been. It's been a good
Jeez.
conversation, and
Jeez.
yeah,
Appreciate you guys spamming our chat while we talk.
yeah.
on
Thanks,
video.
thanks for the spam, guys. It was actually good.
All right. Well, maybe I'll subject you to this again sometime later if you feel like it. But
Yeah,
appreciate you
no, so
coming on.
it'd be fun. It's
Yeah,
been fun. We'll do it again.
maybe I'll put like a YouTube of this up sometime, and we'll see how everyone rejects us as usual.
That's good. That's what I live for.
All right.
All
Good
right,
night,
my
sir.
friend. Have a good
93.
night. Selling 93.